Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Quiet Riot. Hello, and welcome to Quiet Riot Sunday School, the vegan sausage roll to our midweek political buffet. I'm Naomi.
Yum, and I'm Kenny.
First up, a quick request to all of our gorgeous listeners at home to sign up at Ko-Fi, that's ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod if you can, to help us keep this little show on the road. Supporters get access to our Discord channel, plus live editorial and Ask Us Anything video events, one of which is coming up very, very soon.
Oh, it so is. Those events are hugely fun and they really keep us in touch with our most loyal listeners too. Big hugs to you all. To take part, all you got to do is subscribe on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod and then wait for an invite to appear in your inbox in the next few weeks. Bring it on.
Quiet Riot. In a bit, we're going to be touching on the latest in the migration row and also looking at a couple of climate-related stories, which in their own way are very much related to why people move around the planet. But first up, Kenny, to be honest, I'm just gasping for like a good old chit-chat and gossip about the week's political news the world over.
Oh, gasping. I wondered where you were going with that. And there was me thinking it was Alex who was the biggest gossip on the show. Okay, let's give him a run for his money. Hello, Alex, if you're listening. You're going to get a big run for your money. He's going to hate that so much.
He gets such bad FOMO when he's not on Sunday school.
Oh, it's grim. Well, we're going to have to change his meds. So, go on then, Gossip Queen. You start us off.
Well, look, I have been completely absorbed on my TikTok algorithm by mostly American commentators discussing the growing speculation around Donald Trump's ailing health.
Oh, yes.
Let's just have a little listen to him saying that he himself isn't doing so good and wants to get to heaven, and then Caroline Leavitt saying that he really wasn't joking.
I want to end it. You know, we're not losing American lives. We're not losing American soldiers. We're losing Russian and Ukrainian, mostly soldiers. Some people, as missiles hit wrong spots or get lobbed into cities like Kiev and towns. But, if I can save 7,000 people a week from being killed, I think that's I want to try and get to heaven if possible. I'm hearing I'm not doing well. I hear I'm really at the bottom of the totem pole. But if I can get to heaven, this will be one of the reasons.
Later in the day, during a briefing, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about Trump's interview, and she clarified she didn't think the president was joking.
I think the president was serious. I think the president wants to get to heaven, as I hope we all do in this room as well.
So, Kenny, let's wind up and look, what do we know about whether or not he is actually on death's door? You, I think, spotted that he had gone a really long time without playing golf.
Yeah. It's the things that set my sort of journalist spidey senses off, and things that Trump is very good at doing, and he is very good at taking time off and playing golf. He's also impossible to keep off social media, and he's been very quiet over the last few days, incredibly quiet. And I think most of all, and this is perhaps the most bizarre one, but I'm a big believer that Trump finds it pretty much impossible to know something and not share it at some point fairly soon after. And the fact that he spoke about being at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to trying to get into heaven was kind of like the biggest alarm bell of all. It's like, where did that one come from? Who have you been talking to, and why are you sharing this particular secret with us?
And some people say I'm not doing so well, and the condition that has caused his feet to swell and his ankles to look very puffy. The White House has said is chronic venous insufficiency. But what medics are saying online is that that is a symptom, not an illness in its own right. So it is a symptom of vascular poor health, and that what it essentially means is that while blood can get down to the lower parts of his body and it's helping to cause the inflammation there, it's not pumping it back up properly to his heart and
You
to
see,
his
if I was
brain.
Trump's blood, I'd be hiding in his feet as well. I'd be keeping as far away from his brain as I possibly could. I'm not going back up into that particular cesspit.
And then, of course, there's been all of these press conferences where he is behind a desk and his feet can't be photographed. But what, of course, can be photographed are his hands. And we've seen an increasing number of shots of him where there's clear makeup, very poorly blended, on both his right and left hand now, suggesting that they're trying to cover up bruising from presumably catheter, intravenous medication or whatever being put through the vein in his hands. They're saying ridiculous things like, oh, he has to shake so many hands, they get bruised. But come on, Biden was even older, shook even more hands. He didn't ever have that. And wouldn't it be quite the coup for Biden to outlive Trump?
Oh, please.
After everything Trump said about you can't vote for this guy because he's about to die.
I mean, that would be the ultimate Trump own goal, wouldn't it? And I know all my social media feeds where I woke up this morning were much like yours, people going, oh, please, I've got the fizzy in the fridge. And as tasteless as it is, here's a man that deserves tasteless treatment. I think over and above the physical signs that we've been seeing, though, the mental signs are there as well. Now, trigger warning, we are not medical experts here, but we do listen to what comes out. And even by his standards, this week his performances have been rambling and bizarre.
I mean, it's definitely harder to tell if he's got dementia than the average octogenarian. If somebody is very loquacious and an excellent orator and pithy and punchy and all the rest of it, you notice decline really rapidly. With him, with all the mumbling and rumbling and bumbling that goes on over the years, we've kind of become desensitized to tone change.
Yeah, it's kind of as if the Titanic was a submarine when it was launched. Oh, we've hit the iceberg. How can you tell? Oh, I don't know. But I mean, this stuff is serious. It's not, all on socials, we joke about it and we worry about what happens if Vance takes over. Note to self, Vance has mentioned taking over officially now. There's a really serious side to all of this. And of course, the fact that he's this ill in the first year of his presidency means that, we're staring down the barrel of a huge change over there. And it's something that I'd like to ask you. I mean, when Trump shuffles off this mortal coil, as he will at some point, and Vance takes over, we know fine well that Vance comes with his own health warnings as well. But instinctively, and you're a very political creature, what do you think it means for America, specifically from the perspective of the cult of the personality, which is something that Trump is particularly good at?
He doesn't have it. He can't command it. And I do expect that we will see Republicans in both houses who have to date been extremely loyal to Trump for fear of alienation, deselection, candidates being run against them, money pouring into competitor candidates, particularly as we approach the midterms in, about sort of 9 months now, that they won't be as loyal to President Vance as they would have been to President Trump. I don't see Vance as somebody able to command quite the same level of discipline amongst the Republican ranks as Trump has done.
No,
and then
no
when you
chance.
look at the wider movement, the MAGA cult is so intrinsically linked to the man Trump and not Vance that he will have one hell of a job on his hands to try and reincarnate himself in the image of Trump in terms of that devoted loyalty to him.
Yeah.
However, flip side, he is younger and smarter by equal measure. He is as much smarter than Trump as he is younger. So he will be much more ruthless in his political tactics. He will have a much better command of brief than Trump ever has wanted to do, let alone been capable of doing. So I think it'll be an incredibly interesting time. And once again, all eyes on the Dems to see whether they can get their act together, and whether actually part of why they've been quiet about Trump is because they've been busy preparing for Vance. And on that, I think UK government probably know full well the extent of Trump's illness, because that would explain why Vance got the full Chipping Norton treatment this summer from David Lammy and other leading political figures in the UK. I think they're all expecting that it's this guy they're going to be negotiating with in a matter of months, if not years. I think the odds of Trump now being president come the next presidential election are extremely low, and much, much lower than they were when he was first elected in January this year. One other point on the bruising, right? When you look at the makeup, what that signals to me, the bad makeup, poor job at covering up the bruising on his hand, what that says to me is if you alienate the entire LGBTQI plus community, you will not have the best makeup artist at your disposal. There is not a gay in the world that would have allowed bad blending like that to go out on camera. So woe betide, politicians the world over. If you want to look good, stop annoying gay people.
The fact of the matter is that Trump's ability with makeup has been something that's marked him as a bit of an outlier since he first appeared on the scene. He's the only person I know that must shut his eyes before he goes into the makeup drawer. He is like that. I think there's one other point on the future of Trump and the MAGA cult is that J.D. Vance, when he comes in with the backing of exactly the same people who've helped put Trump in power twice. He comes in with the backing of the Thiels of the world. The philosophy around MAGA doesn't change. And in fact, having somebody who is at least able to make a cogent argument in front of the cameras probably makes him much more dangerous in many ways. The rules of engagement may superficially change. Of course it will. Nobody else is like Trump when it comes to that very in-your-face, bumptious approach. But the undercurrents, the philosophy of what's going on there, the America first, the dismantling of the tools that America uses to hold itself together, that's not going away at all, is it?
And, what do I think about it in terms of the American economy? This is a guy who has tried to carve himself out as, being of the hillbillies and the whole hillbilly elegy book. He's not going to want these people to feel the poverty that they are going to continue to feel if tariffs will cause the inflationary impact that we know that they're already having, and the kind of the depressing effect on the economy that Trump's tactics have had. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some kind of reversal on all of that. But look, Kenny, there's loads more gossip to get into.
Is there?
We've got to move on from America and come back to the UK. It's Angela Rayner, who the right are going for very, very hard. Whether that is for similar reasons, they're not expecting Keir Starmer to be the guy to lead Labour into the next election or not, I don't know. But they're focusing, of course, on her property, quote, empire. They're going nuts about it, even though they usually bloody love this stuff. They have no problem with extreme wealthy millionaires and billionaires like Sunak having huge property asset portfolios. But of course, that's when it's one of their own. It's fine. When it's not, they don't like it at all. And let's face it, it is not an empire. Kenny, I don't know if you had a chance to look at a thread by, I believe, one of Quiet Riot's listeners, Emma Monk.
I did. Emma's thread. I did. I was reading it this morning.
Yeah, she did a really good thread on it. We're going to leave a link to her Substack in the show notes, Monk Debunks. But yeah, basically what she did was just an absolutely brilliant kind of drive-by of everything that's being claimed. Makes it easier for people like us to talk it through and for everybody to understand what the right-wing media are up to. And she lays out the facts. So she says, look, there is no suggestion that she has broken any law or indeed failed to pay what she needed to pay. She owned a home in her constituency with her ex-husband in Ashton-under-Lyme until a few months ago, until, as part of the divorce proceedings, presumably, she removed her name from the deeds, as in she
That's
no
right.
longer owns that home. Of course, given her role as Deputy Prime Minister and all of her many other titles that she has the use of a grace and favour home in Admiralty House. Many ministers do and have done for literally centuries. But of course, she does not own that home. That's her, the grace and favour apartment that comes with the job. And so she doesn't own the home in Ashton-under-Lyme anymore. She certainly doesn't own Admiralty House, for goodness sake. But she has now bought a flat in Brighton to have a home. So it's not in additioning to any burgeoning empire. This is a property that she owns. And of course, there are hundreds of MPs that actually own vast swathes of properties and rent them out and live in some and don't live in others. And she just isn't one of those. And so then it's into the detail of what tax she owed, what tax she should have done. And that is where HMRC look at, well, what is your primary residence?
That's right.
And what is your council tax duty there for? The house in Ashton-under-Lyme is her primary residence because her children live there with her ex-husband. And of course, she has to go back there to do childcare duties and all of the things that have to happen when a relationship breaks down. And so there is no legal obligation. You own your primary residence. It's just your primary residence for council tax purposes. So she's told Brighton and Hove Council that the flat that she has bought there is her second home. And so she is now paying the requisite second home premium council tax. So quite the opposite of tax dodging, paying the extra on the second home. So she's being accused of the tax dodging over nothing really to do with council tax, but I assume over stamp duty, because when she bought the flat in Brighton, at a time when she did not own any other property, she only paid the stamp duty she was required to pay on that. Kenny, you follow tax stuff quite closely, actually, and I know that your partner is a tax expert. Is this just very, very desperate political point scoring by the right-wing media and parties like the Conservatives that are going for her on it? Or could there be any, or is it just the state of how complicated our bloody tax system is?
Well, if I give you the honest answer, we would have no conversation, because the honest answer is yes. It's a classic media storm in a teacup. Identify the target, find some mud to sling that way, and this happens to be the mud that they found this summer. My favourite take in stories like this tends to be when the media starts to analyse itself. And I think Emma actually mentioned this in her thread, if I remember rightly, that she quoted a piece in The Independent where the Independent flagged up the fact it took all of 5 paragraphs for the Telegraph story to concede that the legal arrangements were legal. 5 paragraphs it lasted before there is no tax dodging here. Yeah. This is all above board. It's all legitimate. There's nothing to say here other than an attempt to portray Rayner in a bad light. So she's chosen not to pay more tax than she has to, as I think The Independent also made the point that most of the Telegraph's money pages, that money section, is rammed with advice to readers on how to avoid paying taxes that you don't have to. Essentially, I mean, what Rayner's been accused of here is reading the Telegraph and taking the Telegraph's advice.
Indeed.
The hypocrisy is rank, but there's nothing surprising there.
Well, let's look forward to the week ahead, because if we're talking about, Rayner's future prospects, etc., the future prospects of others are going to change next week, because cabinet reshuffle rumours abound. We've already had the sacking of the PM's permanent private secretary, Nin Pandit, who, it's worth noting, was extremely highly rated by none other than Dominic Cummings, but against the extremely low bar of saying that she would make a better PM than Boris Johnson. So if that is not damning someone with faint praise, I don't know what is. But all the noise we had a few months ago about other women being potentially for the chop, and the media really went to town on the rumours that Starmer was going to axe Lisa Nandy from DCMS, even Bridget Phillipson from education. All of those rumours seem to have gone away completely. And I don't know if you've heard differently, but it's sounding to me more like reshuffling the up-and-coming stars into junior ministerial roles rather than changing cabinet top brass. Torsten Bell has already been promoted in the last week within the Treasury to support the Chancellor on the budget. And obviously we had Andrew Lewin on Quiet Riot this week. And, pretty
He's a
decent
good performer, isn't he?
Probably one to watch.
I would hope so. I mean, there's a little part of me, and sorry, Andrew, if you're listening to this, but there's a little part of me that hopes that people like Andrew don't quite make the cut this time around, because we'll stop being able to talk to him. As soon as he gets a junior ministerial brief, that's it. He won't be appearing with us anymore at all. But I mean, one of the it's not so much a challenge, but one of the issues that Starmer has to face, of course, is he's got such a huge number of ministerial roles to fill and junior ministerial roles. And I kind of feel like he's like a football manager who gets to the end of the season and has got a whole bunch of young players that he thinks I really should start blooding some of them, give them some experience and rotate them purely because it's a good idea to start giving younger and fresher people a little bit of experience. And I always try not to read too much into a reshuffle like this, where it is really just about saying, right, we're going to move you in, we're just going to familiarize you with a different level of government. We're going to bring you into not the inner sanctum, but closer to the inner sanctum of government, and just give you a taste of what there is to come. So I'm hoping against hope that there aren't too many big headlines, because frankly, there are enough challenges from a policy perspective for Starmer and the cabinet to deal with right now. But, it's good gossip, isn't it?
Quiet Riot.
If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Quiet Riot.
It's not just Labour who have got some changes of face potentially coming up. On Tuesday, we're going to know who's won the Green Party leadership.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
And we've had some Green people on the show already, as our avid listeners would know. Deputy Leader and GLA member Zach Polanski, specifically. Or there's the MPGO Adrian Ramsey and Ellie Chowns.
And of course, we had Ellie on the show too.
Exactly that. Now, I mean, this comes on the back of the Scottish Greens have just appointed a double-header new, very, very young leadership team up there. Do you think it's all change coming south of the border as well, Naomi?
I would expect Zach Polanski to win. I think all of the smart money has been on him for a long time. I know that hasn't been without, some disagreement within the party, which is normally a very consensual party and sort of does transitions of power in an increasingly family-friendly, we all love each other kind of way. I don't think this is one of those fights. I do think that there probably is quite a bit of tension between Zach and the Adrian Ellie team, who are more broad church, and we need to, be able to speak to people that might be choosing between Reform and Green, between Conservative and Green. Of course, Ellie and Adrian both representing formerly very strong blue seats in rural areas. Zach appealing very much more to the younger, urban, left-leaning types of Greens. And then you've also got this tension in the party about whether they need to go harder into that, what we would have called Corbyn space, or those that think, no, we need to be much more about internationalism. We need to follow the advance of the Green Party in Germany, for instance, and appeal to that broader voter base. And I think that is increasingly interesting when we look at the fragmentation on the left of politics.
Well, I wanted to ask you specifically about that, because whoever wins on Tuesday, is dropped in straight away to a very, very different political environment, aren't they? And the potential power, the potential ability to be part of the king-making process has never been greater for the Greens. But that fragmentation that you mentioned on the left could help them hugely. At the same time, it presumably poses a bit of a threat as well. It's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it?
Hugely. I mean, I think if your party, the Zara Sultana Corbyn party, hadn't emerged when it did, then the Green Party would be on track to mop up a huge number of those votes, particularly under Zach Plansky's leadership. That is now probably not the case, and there would have been an enormous number of people who, would have found a Zach-led Green Party the best option for them, because they were massive Corbynites who left Labour either as members or voters as a consequence of him going as leader there. So I think the fragmentation on the left is something that keeps me up at night big time. They will, if they want to have cut through, need to do deals with one another. Next year is a big year for these parties in particular, because you've got a lot of urban seats up in the local elections. You've got mayoral races. And I think these are exactly the kinds of places where, if they were to be smart and to say, right, well, look, that ward clearly is for you to go for, you give us a easier run in these ones. Combined, they could take quite a lot of seats off of Labour. But if they're going to, fight each other tooth and nail, it fragments everywhere. And then under a first past the post system, you can see other parties coming through, even potentially ones that would be the antithesis of leftist Greens and very left Corbynite.
Which kind of leads us naturally into the question whether now the Lib Dems, where does this leave them?
Well, this is interesting. There was a piece out earlier today before we started recording about the Lib Dems saying they're now going to make a play for Labour-held seats. Of course, at the last election, general election, they really swept that board of the blue wall, picking up dozens and dozens of constituency seats from the Conservatives, and are now, after some local election successes, beginning to look at Labour heartland areas. So the piece was referencing Liverpool, where they've managed to gain some council seats, and of course in Salma's own backyard this week, where the Lib Dems took a council seat in Camden on a swing away from Labour of 19%. So they're now beginning to say, hey, look, we are not just a party that is kind of Tory light. We can also begin to make inroads into Labour areas. I think that's wishful thinking for them for a couple of reasons. First, if you're looking at this on a constituency basis, Sheffield Hallam is the obvious one, where it has often been a kind of three-way race between Lib Dem, Tory and Labour. Really now it's a Lib Dem Labour race. And then if you look further afield from that, there is the potential maybe for that seat that had been Lib Dem since, I think, 1983 under Simon Hughes, now Labour with Neil Coyle, Old Bermondsey. No, is it? I always get this one wrong. Southwark and Old Bermondsey, or Old Bermondsey and Southwark. I will drop the correct one in here later.
Old Holborn.
But beyond that, I can't actually see where there are real, heartland Labour seats that the Lib Dems could pick up. If you cast your mind back to when they had a great Highlander like you, Kenny, leading the party, Charles Kennedy.
Yeah.
Even he couldn't really make inroads into a lot of those seats. I mean, they had Manchester Withington as one of those so-called, strongly held Labour seats. They've never really made inroads into Liverpool at a general election. Now, fast forward 20 years, and you've got a former Conservative Lib Dem coalition minister leading the party. I think it's pretty wishful thinking that they could mop up too many Labour seats at the next election. But hey, this is British politics under a first past the post system in an increasingly mad world. But the main point I want to make is just this fragmentation on the left is dangerous, and the lack of joined up working togetherness could be how parties like Reform come through the middle.
And I suppose I should do a shout out for a more general fragmentation in our politics, because north of the border, this week, the Conservatives in Scotland lost another MSP. That's their third defection, I think, this year.
To reform.
To reform this time. Graham Simpson becomes, I believe, he'll be the sole MSP for reform at Holyrood. It's the third defection from the Conservatives in Scotland this year. We've had one who's now sitting as an independent, one, the first defector who went to the Liberal Democrats, and this latest one who's gone to reform. So when we talk about fragmentation, actually what we're seeing, the way that the Conservatives are disassembling north of the border, is that the fragmentation is taking people in all directions. It's really very difficult to spot where alliances and allegiances are going, much as the headlines all point and talk about the growth of reform, about the Farage effect. The truth is that the people and politicians themselves are blowing off in all directions.
And under different voting systems. So next year with the big election up there in Holyrood and, of course, in the Senedd under proportionate systems versus then the first past the post systems that will be used at council elections. All of this points to the fact that we have got Emma Harrison coming on the show on Thursday, who is the CEO of the leading campaign for PR in the country, Make Votes Matter. So I cannot wait to put all of this stuff to her about how the hell are we going to get PR, because surely that is the only route out of this mess.
Good. I hope you've got some questions about which sort of PR she'd like.
Yeah, the eternal question.
We're going to have a 2-hour special this week, listeners. Get a popcorn.
As a sports fan, I have to confess, sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
And so, after a long, hot summer of baiting by the media, Britain this week, yet again, failed to erupt in race riots. On Friday, the Court of Appeal overturned a temporary injunction which would have prevented asylum seekers from being housed at the Bell Hotel in Epping, and undoubtedly would have led to legal challenges elsewhere.
You know, handing down this decision, the judge in the Court of Appeal said that the judgment wasn't concerned with the merits of government policy on the housing of asylum seekers. But the reality is that this ruling has gone to the very heart of the key political home challenge facing the government at the moment. As I said, the protests here have sparked a wave of protests around the country outside asylum hotels. More of those protests are planned in the coming weeks. Seeing the anger here and the concern on the streets around the country, it does beg the question, is the status quo, migrants being housed in hotels, really sustainable given what we're seeing on the streets of Britain? And so, as I say, for the Home Office, although it is a victory, it is just a temporary reprieve, I think, and we have to wait and see now what the reaction will be both here and around the country.
The Bell is, of course, ground zero for our nation's flag shaggers, and so the appeal court's decision was greeted as you would expect. Reform said the 12 councils it controls should still be exploring legal options to stop asylum seekers being housed in local hotels. Kemi Badenoch inevitably said something depressingly similar, and The Sun, oh, God bless The Sun, it ran a front page on Saturday morning, yesterday if you're listening on a Sunday, which featured a photo of a lone protester, because that's about the size of the protests that we've been seeing. And she's a mother called, and I kid you not, she's called Sarah White, presumably because Sarah, I don't want brown people in Essex, was too long a word to fit in. And she was wearing a T-shirt which said, "Leave our kids alone," because, I don't know, presumably paedophiles trump everything, as it were. And what really grabbed my attention was, above that Sun story on the front page, was a puff for the paper's £9.50 holiday deals featuring 250 locations in the UK and Europe, as a reminder that when it comes to offshoring the destitute in cheap hotels, Britain's got solid gold form all of its own. Naomi, this story, sadly and inevitably, continues to drive the political narrative. But we've covered all the usual arguments ad nauseum. So I'd like to zoom out a bit and look at a couple of significant aspects of the bigger picture. So first up, there's the clear inability of the government, and in particular, the Home Office, to be anything other than, it appears, a political punchbag in all of this. It all smacks a bit of government by reaction. And while I completely understand how challenging the media environment in particular is, I really do wish that our leaders would land a blow or two of their own. Now, am I being unfair to the Home Office?
Let's focus in on the Home Secretary first. So if we look at Yvette Cooper's performance ratings, so Ipsos Political Pulse in August 2024, so a year ago, favourable 28%, unfavourable 33%, net favourability -5, and that is a decline from previous ratings. YouGov panel, among the public, approximately half had no opinion of her about a year ago, 48% to 50%. So net favourability is standing at about -10. And then when you get into this year's polling, an opinion poll had her approval at about 18%, disapproval at 38%, so a net approval of -20, which is a really notable drop, and a drop of 6 points compared to their previous polling. So as a figure, she is not proving to be particularly popular with any segment. That is completely understandable to the likes of you and I, who would like a Home Secretary who was being more enthusiastic about the benefits of migration to the economy, and of course isn't going anywhere near far enough in terms of condemning them as the right of the country would like it to be. But at the heart of this is the enormous backlog they inherited from an incredibly poorly run Home Office beforehand, where applications for approval and processing of those seeking asylum was growing exponentially. And that always leads to the question of, okay, well, should we reorganize the Home Office? And then that gets you into the, well, what would you do? What could you do? So one thing you could do would be to separate out immigration and border security from the Home Office. And then HO could focus solely on policing, security, and counterterrorism. That would bring it into line more with like the Australia's Department of Home Affairs. Australia did then later re-merge some functions and coordination. You could merge policing and justice and take policing out of the Home Office entirely and have a combined law and justice ministry. That is quite common in other European countries, and it keeps police, courts, prisons all under one minister, and you could reduce some of the silo problems you have between police and prosecutors, the judiciary. You could halve off intelligence, so like a national security ministry carving out counterterrorism, MI5, oversight, cybersecurity, all of that into a dedicated department, free up Home Office from that constant pressure of emergencies and national security emergencies and having to divert resource away from bread and butter stuff to things that pop up when you're not expecting them. You could decentralize more. You could devolve a lot more to regional bodies, giving metro mayors powers or regional authorities powers over policing and crime prevention in more the same way that London has. But then when we look at how previous reorganisations have gone, listeners as old as you or I will remember that Gordon Brown did this in 2007.
Oh, yes.
And he split the Home Office, and that's where Home Office kept what it's got now: policing, crime, counterterrorism, immigration, citizenship, identity policy. And then the Ministry of Justice was created to take over prisons and probation courts and sentencing. And the intention was to narrow the Home Office to focus on security and immigration. But it did create new cross-departmental coordination problems, like prisoner release affecting policing, or policing and courts policy being now under different political masters, with immigration remaining in the Home Office, which of course is the most politically fraught area. So the firefighting culture has continued. So some said that the split was more about political presentation and solving management overload. And I think we all agree it is overloaded still. So I think where we're at with the current situation is a government that does want to end this. It does want to end the housing of refugees and asylum seekers in hotels. And that will require rapidly increasing the volume of applications that are being processed, and those that fail being deported, and those that don't being able to stay. But I think we just need to be looking at other models of this and allowing people to work, to earn money so that they can pay for their own housing while their applications are being assessed, so that they can begin to pay tax in this country and embed themselves here and get better at language and take the pressure off these acute pinch points of hotels, which are just then such an easy focus for people to congregate outside and wave some flags at.
I think so, and I think that's probably my take on the situation at the Home Office, is that they're in an impossible position because we've been critical of the comms side of the government before on this show, and they've got David Dinsmore in there now, an ex-Sun editor, to try and shake things up. But the perception, at least, and I think there's probably more to it than perception, is that policy is following the front pages much more than the other way around, where you make a policy announcement and you drive the coverage. You get on the front foot, and the harsh fact is that whether or not the Home Office exists in a new guise, a stripped down guise, or stays as it is right now, those headlines aren't likely to change, are they? The issues aren't going away. The political issues, much more than the practical issues, are what dominates. People aren't really interested that much in genuine solutions. From my perspective, they're interested in the headlines, and they're interested in how they can weaponize these problems.
Quiet riot. Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Quiet riot. Can I zoom out even further?
Yeah.
Like literally to the edge of space itself.
Whoa, this is a big zoom.
We all know that people come to countries like Britain for a better life. Not just that, but to escape a really horrific life, often because they're being persecuted in their own country because of famine, because of war, because of all manner of horrendous situations. But immigration is so intrinsically linked to climate change, right?
Yeah.
And if we think migration is an issue now, not only is the usual backdrop of everything's getting hotter and more dangerous and more awful, and flood risk increasing in vast swathes of the country, in vast swathes of the world, and of course, arid conditions in areas that were previously able to be inhabited. There's been a really terrifying new report out now. Can you talk us through what that is?
Yeah, there was a report came out on Thursday, I think. It was looking afresh at the risk of a catastrophic collapse of a key oceanic current. It's called the AMOC. It stands for Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. It's essentially the big current that comes up from the Gulf and brings food and nutrients and animals and warmth up to the northern part of the planet.
Scientists are now warning that this system could collapse within decades. So, what does that mean? Imagine Europe suddenly getting much colder. Floods along the US East Coast. Monsoons acting weird all over Africa and Asia. The AMOC moves warm water from the tropics northwards and sends cold water back south. It's like the ocean's central heating system. Without it, regional climates could flip upside down. Why is this happening? Melting ice from Greenland is dumping huge amounts of fresh water into the North Atlantic. That fresh water is lighter than salty water, so it stops the normal sinking motion that drives the current. Think of it as dumping a giant bucket of fresh water into your saltwater aquarium. The whole system changes.
It's absolutely critical to climate.
Life as we know it.
Yeah, exactly that. So sun-warmed tropical waters coming up to Europe and to the Arctic. When it gets there, it cools down, as anything does when it goes to the Arctic, forms a deep return current. Now, it's already been, the AMOC has been at the weakest it's been in about 1,600 years. Scientists have been flagging this up as a real problem. Now, there were climate models recently that indicated that while collapse was a risk, it wasn't likely to break completely before the year 2100, which isn't that far in the future, but it's long after we die. But the new analysis looked at models that were run for a bit longer, to 2300, 2500. Now, they talked about a tipping point. This is the key point. This is the key part of this new research. This tipping point makes a shutdown of the current inevitable. I won't go into the details here, but we'll drop a link into the show notes so that those who are interested can do more. But effectively, there's a tipping point that gets reached. And once you reach that tipping point, this current is going to shut down anyway, no matter what we do in terms of pumping carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Even more worryingly, there is now a statistically significant risk that this collapse might happen 50 to 100 years in the future.
I mean, look, I hawk this because, as you know, Kenny, Naomi and winter don't get on. I am a sunflower. I like light and I like heat. And I already dislike British winter intensely. And I bank all of my annual leave for the period like November to March, basically, to go away as many times as I can. And what this model is predicting is that UK conditions in winter could drop anywhere between 5 and 10 degrees Celsius.
That's right.
And I can barely cope with anything below about 15 degrees Celsius.
You're still not Scottish.
Notoriously much colder than that already. And if it was to drop 5 to 10, I'm out of here. I'm joining the migration pattern. I will be out.
Yeah, but you're not going to Ireland, are you? That was your previous.
Exactly. No, sorry,
You've got to redraw your plans to
love
escape.
You loads, but you're caught in this more than the UK is even. So absolutely, I wouldn't be hanging about. Those who are most likely to be anti-migration are almost always those who are most in denial about climate change. Why is the penny not dropping for them? Surely Richard Tice should be like the number one champion for climate mitigation if he wants to be the champion of migration.
Oh, yeah.
Slowing.
Difficult problems requiring difficult solutions. That's not going to happen, is it? It's not a nice, neat headline. I mean, the headlines will come at some point, probably during our lifetimes as well, because the too long didn't read version of all this research is that, as you say, it gets hotter in the summer and colder in the winter. That's across all of Western Europe. So if you're planning to escape to mainland Europe because you don't want the cold summers, where you're going to be facing a very dry, hot, and probably fiery summer as a result, it doesn't register politically the same way that foreign people in hotels in Epping registered. These are difficult things. Science is harder than racism. Okay,
and it's further away, and we always get caught in this problem of short-termism.
Yeah,
whether it was short-termist hedging that led to the financial crisis, or short-termist policy making. If a voter cannot feel the impact of what I'm deciding before the next election, I won't be rewarded for it, so I'm just not going to bother doing it. It is increasingly difficult to get any politician to legislate for something that isn't going to be felt for 10, 20, 50, 100 years' time.
Yeah. And there's a double problem with that. One is that proximity, when it comes to catching people's attention. I know this is a newspaper editor. Proximity to a story is utterly essential. By that, I mean, it could be physical proximity. It's why when a bus falls in a ravine in India and 70 people die, we don't really care about it or read about it in Britain. But if the butcher shop down the road gets robbed by a dog, oh my goodness me, that's close to me. I'm reading about that. There are things like emotional proximity, so that's why we follow the royal families, why we follow celebrities.
In the front pages.
Yeah, that's right.
Ridley, my dog, he literally nicked an entire onion bhaji from a market stall the other day.
An onion bhaji? That's such a you thing. Only your dog would nick a vegetarian snack.
Farmer's market, and they have a lovely, stall, and they put like a tablecloth over the under the produce, and then they hide all of the extras behind the cloth, which is branded with the name of the street vendor. And so I was queuing up with him to get some nice curries and things like that, and I had the lead a little bit slack, my fault. And next thing I know, he's backing up from under this thing with the most enormous onion bhaji in his gob. I mean, and he bloody loves an onion bhaji, and onions are not good for dogs. So
he bloody loves an onion bhaji. He's a dog.
Honestly, I was mortified because he'd had his snout in the entire bucket of bhajis. God knows how much he'd slobbered on those. And so I had to fess up because the poor guy behind the till had not clocked what had happened, and I paid for a few extra onion bhaji.
Oh, no. Isn't Wrigley a pizza fan most of the time?
No, I mean, he's an anything fan, really, but pizza's a bit bland for his palate. He quite likes, chili, garlic, ginger, strong flavours. Getting back to the serious stuff then, is there any good news on the horizon about this and how we could mitigate and not reach that tipping point on current changes that will destroy the atmosphere as we know it?
The bad news is we're getting very close to the point where this tipping point happens no matter what we do. That's the damage that we've caused in the last few centuries, and there's no reversing away from that.
And onion bhaji methane will be a big contributor.
Wrigley, go to the naughty step. And I think the other one piece of bad news, of course, that it would be wrong of me not to mention before we get on to more positive stuff is the fact that climate change in the last few months has been weaponized against doing things like moving across to green energy. Donald Trump, I hate to come back to him, has put the blockers on renewables.
And pulled the US out of the Paris Accords again.
All of that stuff. And that comes back to sort of the proximity word that I was using just a few minutes ago. These are political moves that will garner short-term support and break things in the medium and long term, by which time he won't even be breathing. He doesn't have to care. But at the same time, there are other people and there are other organizations who are making progress. When we talk about China, yes, terms and conditions apply, but China's investment in green energy is off the scale. They set a whole bunch of targets to be hit by 2030 in terms of how much they generate from renewables. And they've smashed it. They've hit the 2030 targets for solar and wind-generated power already. And I read somewhere that within the next year or two, they're going to be generating more from renewable energy sources in China than America consumes in total. So the Chinese will be not just using this relatively cheap form of electricity and relatively clean forms of electricity, they're going to be exporting it as well. This stuff is exportable. But there was also on a much smaller scale, there was a little story that caught my eye this week from Finland, of all places. And Finland, being up near the Arctic Circle, has got its own particular issues around the sort of patterns of energy consumption and such like.
And proximity to Russia, of course. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they don't have their challenges to seek. But in Finland, they've got a big battery. All right, it's a big battery made of sand. It's technology that scientists have been working on for some years now. But this week, Finland inaugurated officially what is the largest sand battery in the world. It's a megawatt thermal storage system. Basically, they crush up soapstone, I think it's called. There's 2,000 tons of this soapstone is put in a giant barrel, if you like. It's about 13 meters tall, 15 meters wide, and it stores heat. That's basically the technology. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that, but the sand keeps heat, and it keeps things at a very, very high temperature, and it's already exceeding its efficiency targets, and it's replaced an old wood chip plant that they were using to top up their local power supply for all of summer. So it's an incredibly efficient way of hanging on to heat. At the moment, they're using, I think, heat exchangers to take the heat and either heat businesses locally, and they're looking at how they can convert that heat into steam. And once you've got steam, you can put turbines in, you can start to generate electricity locally. And at its simplest, what this means is if you're running a wind farm or solar panels or what have you, you can keep your solar panels feeding in to this battery. You can keep your wind farm running even when the grid doesn't need all the electricity. And you can just fill these batteries full of energy. Now, that battery in Finland, I believe, would keep a town running for about a week. That's sort of the non-scientific way of describing how significant it is. Now, once you start to think about these sort of batteries cropping up around towns in tandem with electric cars, which you can plug into the grid during the day to power homes and businesses when peak demand when demand is at its highest, and then recharge them at night, you start to see how we can build an electrical generation, storage, and distribution system that relies largely on energy that we're able to pull from the atmosphere, or indeed from that huge fusion engine that's sort of 8 minutes at the speed of light from the sun. So hugely simple technology, and yet it makes me very, very optimistic that in a couple 100 years' time, we are going to be on a planet where they've finally got their heads around the challenges of a species that demands ever-increasing amounts of electricity, but refuses to take the difficult decisions around the impacts of generating and distributing all that electricity. So there we go. I mean, that's a little bit of uplifting news, I think.
Yeah, it is. And I think we should give people a call to action. It's not climate related, but it is fascism related.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to head over to Hope Not Hate and sign their latest campaign, which is emailing the Home Office to prevent Great Yarmouth, of course it would be Great Yarmouth, hosting the biggest neo-Nazi music festival in over a decade.
Yes.
The Home Office, of course, has power to block entry of overseas bands. And so, there are bands coming in from all over Europe who have got really, really nasty ethos behind them. They won't act unless we demand it. If they can proscribe Palestine action, they can sure as hell stop a neo-Nazi music festival from taking place. So we will leave a link in the show notes so that you can add your voice to the calls on the Home Office to say hate has no home here.
Excellent. Quiet riot. And so, without so much as a rattle of a collection plate, that's another Sunday School done and dusted.
Thank you so much for your company today, Kenny. thank you, everybody listening at home, particularly for your banter on Blue Sky and on our subscribers' Discord feed as well. We love it there.
Yeah, I second that. And did I say that there was no collection plate to rattle? Not so fast. If you fancy donating the price of a cuppa, then please do sign up on ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod for access to live chats, that Discord channel that Naomi just mentioned, and our next Ask Us Anything session.
And whether you subscribe or not, it is a huge help if you can simply share our little show with a friend or two. So whatever your favourite episode has been lately, ping it over to them on WhatsApp and let them know that they might enjoy it too. We're going to be back on Thursday with our regular smorgasbord. Plus, as I mentioned, special guest Emma Harrison, CEO of the country's leading campaign for making votes matter.
Woohoo! Until then, we love you lots. Bye!
Bye!
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.
I earned my degree online at Arizona State University. I chose to get my degree at ASU because I knew that I'd get a quality education, they were recognized for excellence, and that I would be prepared for the workforce upon graduating. To be associated with ASU, both as a student and alum, it makes me extremely proud, and having experienced the program, I know now that I'm set up for success. Learn more at asuonline.asu.edu.